The air was above freezing. The desert around it was still warm from the day before, and yet by sunrise, the Persians had ice, solid, sitting in a shallow basin out in the open, under nothing but sky. No electricity, no freezer, no chemicals. So how? This is Yazd, a city on the edge of Iran's central desert, where summer temperatures still climb past 50 degrees Celsius today. Scattered across its skyline are enormous conical towers, built more than 1,000 years ago, rising out of the mud brick rooftops like something between a kiln and a monument. What these towers once did is something modern engineers still find remarkable. They produced ice in a place where ice should have had no business existing, and kept that ice solid through a season hot enough to kill an unprepared traveler in hours. Historians can walk into these structures right now, and the evidence for how this worked isn't a legend passed down over campfires. It's standing brick and mortar, still holding its answer. After 1,000 years of sun, here's what made it so strange. This desert doesn't just get hot, it swings violently. Under a punishing sun, the ground can feel like the inside of an oven, the horizon shimmering, the air itself seeming to bend. But because the air is so dry, it holds almost none of that heat once the sun disappears, and the temperature can fall hard and fast after dark, the warmth draining out of the landscape within hours. Even so, winter nights here typically sit a few degrees above freezing. Not below it, above it. Which means, by every ordinary intuition about temperature, the water sitting in that shallow basin had no right to turn solid by morning. But that still doesn't explain the ice, because the air genuinely was too warm to freeze it. So what was the water losing its heat to? Not the air around it, something else entirely. Every object radiates its own warmth upward, out into open space, as invisible infrared energy, constantly, quietly, whether anyone notices or not. Normally, clouds catch that radiation and send some of it straight back down, keeping the ground a little warmer through the night, like a blanket pulled over the desert floor. But on a clear desert sky with nothing overhead to catch it, that heat simply escapes. It leaves the surface and never comes back, vanishing upward into the black. A shallow pool of water, exposed directly to that open sky, can radiate away its warmth faster than the surrounding air can replace it. Its surface temperature drops below the air temperature around it, sometimes just far enough to cross the freezing point, even while a thermometer held at chest height would still read a few degrees warmer. They didn't have a word for radiative cooling. They didn't understand infrared energy, or the physics of a clear night sky acting like an open window into space. What they had instead was centuries of observation, passed down and refined generation after generation, long before anyone could explain why it worked. Through that slow process of watching and adjusting, failing and trying again, Persian engineers had found the exact conditions that produced it, and had built for them precisely. Basins kept shallow, so the water would react fast to the sky above it. Walls positioned to block the wind, so the water's surface stayed still and undisturbed, and always left open overhead, so nothing came between the water and the night. The sky itself became the mechanism. No fuel, no flame, no machinery, just geometry pointed at the right patch of darkness. That solved the freezing. It did not solve the real problem, because making ice on a cold winter night is one thing. Keeping that ice solid through a desert summer, in air that would soon pass 50 degrees, is another problem entirely. And it demanded a completely different kind of engineering, layered on top of the first. The first answer was underground. Persian builders had already mastered qanats, tunnels carried for kilometers beneath the desert floor, moving water in constant shade, far below the scorching surface, invisible from above. In some locations, Yakhchals were positioned near these underground water systems, taking advantage of the cooler environment below the surface even while the ground above them baked under the sun. The second answer was the wind. Beside many ice houses stood tall towers called badgers, built to catch any breath of moving air, even a whisper of it, and funnel it downward into the storage chamber below, then pull the warmer air back out. A ventilation system with no engine, running entirely on air pressure and geometry, working silently day and night without a single moving part. And the third answer was the walls themselves, some more than 2 meters thick, built from a mortar called sarouj, sand, clay, ash, lime, and, remarkably, egg whites and goat hair worked together into a compound designed to dramatically slow the movement of heat so that the fierce warmth outside could take a long time to penetrate the thick walls. Underground cooling, passive wind ventilation, thick, heat-resistant walls, 3 different technologies working together into a single structure, essentially an ancient refrigerator, running on nothing but geometry, airflow, and the desert's own temperature swings, with no gas, no coils, and no power source of any kind. And the scale could be startling. One modern engineering analysis of a Yakhchal in Maybad, not far from Yazd, modeled its ice-making pond and estimated that in a single winter it could produce around 50 cubic meters of ice, roughly the volume of 3 million modern ice cubes, frozen a thin layer at a time, on nothing but cold, clear nights. But why go to all this trouble for ice? Because in a desert, the real value of ice was never simply that it was cold. It was that cold could be stored, carried across a season that would otherwise erase it entirely. Ice from these towers preserved food in a region where spoilage could mean famine, buying time in a climate that otherwise gave none. It chilled the drinks and desserts of the wealthy, including an early ancestor of a Persian treat still eaten today. Ice folded with fruit syrup, a luxury the average person never touched. It found its way into early medicine, into the storage of goods moving along trade routes, into the simple relief of surviving a summer that still challenges people with air conditioning. Rulers understood that commanding the climate was its own kind of authority, a visible sign of power in a land that punished the unprepared. And the laborers who built these towers, whose names were never recorded, spent their working lives perfecting comfort that most of them would never personally enjoy. Not every story about the Yakhchal survived contact with evidence, though. Local legend sometimes stretches it into something closer to magic, ice appearing overnight as if summoned, freezing water in any conditions at all, on any night of the year. The physics doesn't support that. This only worked on clear, still, sufficiently cold winter nights, and the engineers who built these towers understood that limitation precisely, timing their work around it rather than fighting it. They weren't defying their climate. They were reading it, with a level of precision that took centuries to refine. The desert wasn't the obstacle here. It was part of the machine, and the exact reliability of any single design likely varied by location and construction. The ice houses of Yazd weren't one universal machine, but a family of solutions built on the same underlying trick, adapted again and again to local ground, local wind, local water. And that trick hasn't gone quiet. The same radiative cooling effect Persian builders exploited through pure observation is now being studied by materials scientists and engineers, chasing the same goal in a modern context: cooling buildings and even food storage without burning electricity in a world newly anxious about energy and climate. A method refined more than 1,000 years ago in a desert with no machinery at all is being re-examined, seriously, as a genuine tool for the future, not as a historical curiosity, but as a working principle worth borrowing again. Stand at the base of a Yakhchal today, and it still throws a long cone of shade across the sand. Empty of ice now, but not empty of meaning. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't even have the physics they were quietly exploiting. Only the patience to notice what the sky was doing and the discipline to build around it. What they had was observation, repeated over generations, against a desert that seemed absolutely determined to destroy any ice they made. They didn't conquer that heat. They found the one narrow set of conditions where the desert would work against itself, and built an empire's worth of comfort out of a trick hiding in plain sight in the night sky above their heads.